you haven't seen the last episode, definitely watch it. I made a fully custom aluminum gas tank with insane hard lines, and I built it for over 1,400 horsepower between 2 fuel systems. So today I'm going to run my fuel lines, and they are all gonna be AN, because I have to run AN because I'm gonna be running over 120 PSI of fuel. I've got 2 massive fuel pumps down here, one for each engine, and they pump 400 liters per hour. So the goal here is I'm going to run a AN10 line down to my fuel pump, which is down here. And then after it comes through the fuel pump, I'm going to run an AN6. I'm going to route it underneath, and then I'm going to put it to a fancy Holley filter that's good for E85, thankfully. AN lines can be very intimidating when you're actually getting into it because it is very serious and it's very expensive, but if you follow some simple steps, it's actually very easy to do and it's very reliable in the end. So I've got it right beside my tank, right by the frame rail. I'm gonna bolt it in there. I got a nice mount for it, so that's pretty cool. So this fuel filter is going to be for the rear engine. It's gonna be very local to right in the back here. And then this fuel filter is going to go all the way to the front, and this one's going to give the front engine some fresh, clean fuel. And it's gonna run all the way up here and then run to the front engine. All right, so I mounted my fuel filter, and I'm sort of thinking that I'm going to go with a 90 right here for the input for the fuel filter, just so I can cleanly go to my bottom of my tank, because the actual fuel pump ends right here, and then it's gonna come out right there. So I think the 90 is gonna work for me. I need one more, so I'm gonna order one, but that's looking good. Awesome, so I'm gonna be running my first AN lines on this car ever, and I'm freaking stoked. Gonna make some huge power with this stuff, and I cannot wait. It's gonna look nasty. It's going to literally be race car spec, guys. So I got both the actual fuel filters mounted. Looks very, very clean, very symmetrical. You can see them popping over there and over there. Look at that, that's looking beautiful. So I'm going to run these to my fuel pumps, and they are under here, right there. That's where I've got to run it to, and it's got to go up to there. I'm gonna run an AN10 from this fitting down to the in my fuel pump. That is going to feed the pump with fuel. So it's already going to be going through a filter because the actual fuel net is considered a fuel filter. So it's gonna be filtered before the fuel filter and then after, right here on the actual Holley ones. Unreal. So I got my first one done. I'm gonna bolt it up and see how it fits. That looks sick. So these are literally AN10s feeding my fuel pumps, and they're looking nasty. Going down, and I'm going to route this out of the fuel pump up to here. And this has a 90 on it, and so does the fuel pump down there. So I'm gonna run that in, and it'll be all done for the fuel pumps and the actual filters. I'm gonna put this on the end of this AN6 line, mount it up to the actual fuel filter. So how this is done is you will get a fitting just like so, and there will be 2 pieces. So this will unscrew. So that is the first step. Unscrew this. And there's a threaded piece that the hose actually goes over, and I will explain how to do this right now. As you can see, there's quite a bit frayed here, so what I'm going to do is make another cut. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some electrical tape and go over the line where I want to cut it in the center of the actual electrical tape. I will put a whole bunch of electrical tape on the line, and I will cut it into the center. So as you can see, I got a whole bunch of electrical tape on there, and I'm gonna use a grinder and cut right down the center, and pretty much everyone's got a grinder so they can do this at home. And then now I'm going to reverse thread this fitting onto it, and it's got a tapered edge, and I just go down as far as it'll go until it bottoms out. And it'll almost stop completely, and that's when you know it's there, and you'll check and see if the hose is actually coming up to the top. Now I'm gonna clamp it into my vise very, very tightly on my rubber jaws here. Now I grab my 90 piece, a whole bunch of light lube on the threads before I insert it, and I'm going to do so right now after I've cleaned everything. and then just thread it in all the way down till it mates the actual other face of the fitting. Now I'm literally going to thread this onto my fuel filter, and now I'm going to run the length right to the pump and then figure out exactly how much length I need, and I'm going to mark it with going around it with a piece of tape. So I'm adding the tape exactly where I want to cut it into the center of the tape. As you can see, these fittings spin a bit, and it will lock whenever position it's in once you tighten it down. I'm gonna run a couple of these Jimmy Bobs around the hose just to make sure nothing's gonna get wrecked, and then I'm just gonna bang it into the frame there and it'll be all done. That is looking super sexy. Looking mad clean. The last thing before putting the engines in is the fuel system, and I'm very, very, very close. That setup's looking clean. That fitting right there is going to go to my intake, which is not currently here because the engine's not in. So I'm gonna wait so I can make it the correct length. And the bottom is a return. So that is going to go back to the top of my tank, and I'm going to weld the bung to there, and then it's gonna go back in. Oh yeah. Can't wait to drive this car. It's honestly starting to drive me nuts. So there's my fuel pressure regulator, and that is quite a serious one. I'm going to also have gauges that pop out of there so I can see what fuel pressure I'm at. But this is looking clean. Then it goes to the fuel filter, and then it goes down underneath the tank to my fuel pump that is massive, and then it goes up and right into the side of my tank to my hard lines and my fuel mat. I have two fuel pressure regulators, and the reason is because I have two engines and two intakes, two fuel systems, two engine bays. It's completely individualized. It makes things twice as confusing and twice as expensive, but it's gonna be twice as sick. Okay, so this is a stock set of fuel rails. What I'm gonna do is just gut everything right down to the rails, and I am going to have to weld AN fittings onto these fuel rails to adapt to my intake, to adapt to my AN lines, just to adapt to what I want. And now they're fully gutted. Got all the injectors out. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna actually cut this end off where the stock fuel pressure regulator was. And I'm going to be welding on some AN stuff and cleaning these ugly girls up a bit. Okay, I got my two intakes here, and I'm figuring out how to get my injectors into these intakes and have the AN setup all done nicely. Sweet, so I got the fuel rails in. So this is where the old regulator used to go, and I do not need that anymore. And this is going to be my in. Normally this was pointing to the other side. Long story short, I screwed up when I made these intakes and I didn't put the flanges on the correct way. I put them 180 degrees out. Thankfully, the injectors still bolt in and they actually go to the correct hole for the injector. So that's good, but everything's backwards. Like these used to be over here by the throttle body. And now it's backwards because I screwed that up. And it's funny because I screwed up the same on both of them. So I'm doing the exact same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out because I don't need this little piece here with the threads. Cut that gone. Cut this all gone because I don't need that. Then I'm going to drill 2 holes because this needs to recirculate. So this needs to be connected to this. I'm going to do that with a couple AN fittings that I'm going to weld in. And then I can loop them and then I will be back in action. So this is a before shot of me grinding it and filling holes. And this is after. So things aren't as long. Things are a little more tidy. I got the 2 holes there. And I'm going to weld these little fittings on there so I can recirculate. All right, so now it's time for me to weld them fully and I'll be good to go. Six. So I got these completely welded. The bungs are on, the AN6s. Beautiful, 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 looking awesome, all sealed up 100%. The next thing is I have to get this setup ready for a dead end fuel system setup. So this is the fuel system I am running. It is a returnless fuel system. Let's start at the fuel tank here. So I got my fuel tank, and as you can remember that I have the actual fittings on the side of the tank, and they're right there. Then they feed my fuel pump. They're at the pump, and it pumps it to my fuel pressure regulator. And that is what decides what pressure of fuel I'm going to run. Because if it's a high pressure, it will relieve it to this line right here. And let's just assume the fuel's going straight through. Going straight through to the fuel rail, to the other fuel rail. It's a V6, so there's 2 fuel rails and they get mixed together. So it literally stops here. This is the end of the track. So this is what's deciding the pressure by going back to the fuel tank. This is why it's called a returnless fuel system. Because normally the return is right here, and deleting this whole setup is it would just go right back to the tank and it would have the actual regulator right here. But this is different. So therefore, since I have 2 rails, I will need to cap one actual end of the fuel injector. So I'm gonna actually have to fill one of these holes and make sure that is not gonna leak because I have a dead-ended fuel system. Zeddy. End is on the left, and on the right, I am blocking it completely off with a weld. So I'm going to remove it from the intake now, and I'm going to do my thing. Do some tiggy boys, you know what I'm saying? So the back here is all done. It's just going to be bolt on with a hose and be good to go. And Bob is obviously your uncle. That's not leaking anytime soon. And neither is that. That was the hole I filled on 2 rails. And I'm freaking stoked on how that turned out. That was just dab after dab, pylon after pylon. It didn't even end up being high. I really, really like it. This is the before. Now that's what I'm talking about. So I got 2 lefts and 2 rights. Everything is done, painted, and I can put my injectors in. I'm gonna be putting 850cc injectors in. Right on. So I got them all numbered. I have little marks on each of them. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. very hard to see, but I can see them, and I'm going to put them in the correct order in my injectors. So if I have a problem and I take the car apart, I can actually remember which hole it went into and all that, so I can follow which injector is bad. So if I remove everything and had a problem in one cylinder, I would know which one it is. And I got them in the right order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm gonna put them in like that. Everything's looking good, it's looking stout, professional, and good to go. So I'm going to put the caps on and then install these into the intake. Wow, those look so good. Nothing special, but it looks tight, and I'm very happy with it. All the welds look good on the actual ins and outs. All my plugs, yeah. Things are looking really nice. So this whole setup is 100% done. I've got the holes filled that I needed. I got bungs welded on. It's looking tight. The 850cc injectors are in. The moment you've all been waiting for, installing them actually into the intake.
That the brothers on the rise now. Endless celebrations all in my house. Levitating now, I'm super duper fly now.
Look at that, all done. The injectors are in and looking real fancy. I got everything looped around here. This was the hardest part of the actual rail system, is having this looped around with correct line that is good for E85 and race fuel. Looks so nasty. So there's quite the fuel system that I've gotten here right now. It's 850cc, and they're gonna be pumped with all the fuel, 120 PSI, and it is going to be wild. It's gonna be enough for over 1400 horsepower, and I'm very, very, very excited about that. And I can't wait to put these intakes on the engines. I'm 100% ready to put these onto the engines. Okay, so this is the top of my fuel tank, and what I have to do now is I have to weld on some bungs. These are steel bungs. This is a steel top, so I'm going to weld them from the inside so it's not as noticeable, and I'm going to have my AN6s right here, which is bomb. I'll be able to just bolt my returns onto the top, no problem with the AN fittings, and I'm going to be set to put this on for the final time on my fuel tank. Mocked all the paint there, so I'm gonna have to sand it and paint them or whatever, but this is much better. But the main thing is I didn't want to melt this actual gasket here for this guy because he's close, right? If I melted it, then I would have had more troubles here. I actually just decided I'm gonna paint this purple because I have some spots that needed sanded, so sand it with purple. While I'm waiting for that paint to dry, I'm going to install this fuel pressure gauge into my actual returns here. They just kind of go right in there with some tape on it, and it'll be a nice thing to have. Would you look at that? Sweet, so now I'm gonna run this return back to the back of the car that is going to go to the top of the fuel tank. Got that nice clean line set up.